Abandoning both good acts towards one's dear ones and evil deeds towards unfriendly people, a person attains God by the practice of deep meditation. Thus, having known the procedure, barring investigation into the nature of the self, the ascetic shall not devote himself to any other practice. As a result of such practice, there is the attainment of respective worlds, such as heaven. By one endowed with wisdom and dispassion, liberation is attained in himself. Hence, there is no adherence to any other practice. Adherence to any other practice will be useless for attaining liberation. We're going to break down 3 reasons, and I'm going to use the 7 heavens or the 7 worlds as we go through each. 3 major reasons why society is an issue when it comes to spiritual development or spiritual attainment to be able to get into the spiritual or heavenly states. First reason is because society obligates you to social validation. We're going to be dealing with social validation, very important. The problem and issue with social validation is because overall it's conditional love. You have to impress people. There's a standard. There's not unconditional love, it's conditional love. The social validation puts pressure on you to fulfill some type of standard or some type of role. And that social validation is the root of the first problem. We'll deal with 3, but when you break down this problem with social validation, society obligates you to do good or bad acts for social validation. Remember, those good or bad acts is what we read in the first verses of the text. It says, abandoning both good acts towards one's dear ones and evil deeds towards unfriendly people, a person attains God by the practice of deep meditation. So you have to abandon both good and evil acts, right? So society obligates you to good or bad acts for social validation. That's what society is the construct of. That's what they do. So good acts would be all of the things that you think are good. Remember, there's 3 paths and there's 3 types of people. There's the evil, the good, and the holy. Or the holy, the good, and the evil. Those 2 paths of good and evil is the path that society is based on. The 3rd path, the holy path, is to renounce and leave society, to go to the spiritual world or heaven in the context of this verse. So it says society obligates you to good or bad acts for social validation. Social validation, remember, social validation is only for the access of the fulfillment of one's desires, one's biology. Now, your desires are just like hunger and thirst. You have to satisfy them or gratify them, or they'll disturb your thoughts in your mind. And those desires is what is the chain or the bondage of why you seek social validation. Because with social validation, you get access to money. To access the money and social validation, you get what? Sex. And sex or food. Now, sex is the food is the most dire need, but sex comes right after. Now, those 2 things are the desires that trap you to society, to try to impress people, humans. Let me say this. Now, those good and bad acts, remember, activity is the realm of the root chakra, the first world. So that's the first heaven. That world is called Bhu Loka, or Bhu, the physical world. That first world is where you're obligated to these acts because of your desire. The next world is Swarga, or the Swadhisthana chakra, or the sacral plexus chakra. That world of the next dimension, or the next state, is the realm of desire. Remember, you're doing the activities of good and bad for your desires. See, for your desires, your physical needs and desires. Well, that next realm of desire, sexual and hunger, dealing with that, social validation is for the access to the fulfillment of those desires. Remember, we said that, but those desires keep you from dispassion or spiritual detachment. Those desires keep you from dispassion. Now you have to choose how you're going to allot your time in a volume of a day, and that's in the volume of a week, month, and a year. All of it adds up to your life. Now, when you obligate most of your life to those desires, you are trapped in a realm of addiction or attachment to what materialism, material objects, which is money, cars, wealth, all of that, or your desires, which is why all of those objects were needed, which is sexuality, family, food, so on. All of these addictions, these cravings, that's passion, that's attachment, which you have to be able to cultivate detachment, to be able to spend most of your time obligated to the mysteries of the spiritual world, or the mysteries of heaven, the mysteries of God, mysteries of your soul, mysteries of your true self. That is the whole point of detachment from the physical world. Now that we're here in the second world, Swadhisthana, or the next level called Bhuvarloka, this is the realm of desires, or the realm of your ancestors. You're only here as a product of your ancestors' desires. Let's break this down. It says, by one endowed with wisdom and dispassion, liberation is attained inside himself, right? By one endowed with wisdom, right? And dispassion, remember, you renounce the realm of desire. Liberation, spiritual liberation, is attained in himself. See, heaven is attained inside of yourself. Very key. The kingdom of heaven is what? Within. Very key. So, quoting that scripture, that is the second realm. And that's all makes up the first reason. And the first reason is because of social validation, right? Which, like I said, is conditional love, conditional acceptance. And that puts a burden on you mentally, because all you seeking to gain is the access and the fulfillment of your innate desires. But it seems as though you just want to socialize and be involved, but really is beyond that involvement is the gratification of some dopamine or some desire. But moving on, that's the first reason though, is social validation. It's a problem because it's what is shallow, it's vain, it's mundane, and it's what conditional. It's not pure. It's based on conditions and standards. So with that, first reason is the first problem why, the first reason why you have to renounce society to reach heaven. Check, because it's an illusion. Second reason is society forces you to seek social validation from your dear ones. Remember, it says your dear ones, which is what? Family and friends, and creates an ocean of duality. Society causes competition, right? Which translates to what? Division, to hate, to war, which is what? Racism, sexism, nepotism, classism. All of these isms is rooted with the desire for social validation. But we're moving on to the next world, which is the solar plexus, which is the realm of social positioning or status or influence or fame. That's the solar power. That's the realm of the willpower to give influence, to make things move, to get things active, like the sun peering down onto the physical world. Well, when your soul reaches that point, that's what you desire to be to the world, a light of influence. But the problem with that world, or that state, being the third level, pretty low, and that realm is called Swargaloka or Devaloka, the realm of the gods, the realm of the Devas. Now, very important is the Devas, they cause humans to be in this football game, this game of competition. And that game, or that field, that the teams that are playing, the whole game is society. That's the game that the Devas have created for their own entertainment, for their own enjoyment, while we suffer at the expense of it. And we'll deal with the Devas in the future. These are basically gods or demigods, or lesser beings. But it says, so society forces you to seek social validations from your family and friends, which is what? Your dear ones, and creates an ocean of duality. Creates a whole vast crowd, whole massive amount of people trapped in duality, based on what? Race, gender, class. And then you have this whole thing that you cannot escape, which is the alpha, beta, the ranking system within each social group. See, within each family or group of friends, you have the alpha, beta, sigma, theta, these different levels of status, and constantly competing and revolving and seeing who will be at the head or be at the top to get access to the fulfillment of their desires quicker or more easier. You see this in wolves, you see this in lions, you see this in the animal kingdom, and humans are no different. This second reason is the problem. It's because of competition. Society creates competition. So a pack of wolves creates what? Competition within inside of themselves and outside of themselves. And that competition translates to division, hate, war, racism, sexism, nepotism, classism, all of it, genocide, all of that. So once you finally get past that round, it's very important. Everyone cannot score the touchdown. Everyone cannot get the goal. Everyone cannot make the shot. So what does that do? It creates teams. Everybody's got their color and their flag and their team color. Well, that's what creates the competition. Unlike a sports game, The game of life is way much more harsh and way much more evil and way much more cutthroat. You see, way much more brutal than an innocent, shallow football game. The game in this world has a bigger price. That duality that was created because of the social validation with all of these different constructs of race, gender, class, and so on, that competition is only going on. Remember, that ranking system is only going on over the competition for what? For sex, money, and power. For what? Sex, money, and power. And they go hand in hand, right? And that obligates you to do evil deeds against your enemies. Remember, at the very beginning of the scripture, it says abandoning, but renouncing both good acts towards one dear ones. You have to get rid of that idea of being attached to good acts towards who you think is your dear ones, and evil deeds towards unfriendly people or your enemies. Doing evil deeds against your enemy. That's what the competition creates. It creates enemies and allies. Team versus that team. Home away team versus home team. And that duality, that competition, creates all of the suffering we have in this physical world. But it also keeps you distracted and keeps you from seeking the spiritual world or attaining or ascending to the heavenly state or heaven. This duality is based on the competition over sex, money, and power. Sex, money, and power, or status. Power meaning status or fame or position. It's all based on how do you attain it. It's all based on what? Sexuality, which is sexual seduction, brutality, and deception. Those three evil acts is what you do against your enemies. But the whole world ends up being your enemy when you try to attain these desires and get social validation for yourself. You get it? So what we have to understand, going to the heart chakra now, to the fourth world, remember, Bu, Buvar, Swarga, or Devaloka. Now we're in Mahaloka, the great world, right? Now we're in the holy realm, the Sattvic realm. In the heart chakra, the Anahata chakra, you have to understand that God dwells there, and that God is beyond duality. That's why this point is very important. That consciousness of that space is able to see all beings, all visible and invisible forces as one's own self, a part of your own appendages and ligaments of your own self, your own essence, your own consciousness. That's immortal. You took this birth for one period between 80 to 100 years, which is a blink of an eye to your real self. You really are all of the beings and everything that you see, as within, so without, as above, so below. That's the great mystery. But you can't see that mystery when you're trapped in the individual ego and competing against everyone else for the attainment of your desires. That's the problem with society. It superimposes and obligates you and all individuals to this game, to this fight, to this competition. So that's the second reason, competition, which leads to brutality, division, hate, war, and all those other things. So the third reason, let's move on to that. Now we move from the heart. Now you yourself should have let go of the duality and renounced it. And that means to renounce society. Very key. Okay, the third reason that society keeps you from heaven or the spiritual states is that because society is a distraction. Remember, we moved from the heart, now we move to the throat, brow, and crown chakra. So now we beyond around with duality. We pass that ignorance. You now move into the state of the throat and the brow. Now, in those states, we get the third reason why. And the reason is because society and its obligations and all of its need for social positioning and social validation and the pecking order of rank and class and all of this rat race of activity, which is pointless pretty much. All you're trying to do is impress others to be able to attain your desires, to get access to your desires, trying to impress the opposite sex or impress your peers to be able to get access to the opposite sex or money or opportunities. Pointless, it's vain. Spiritually, it's vain. So it's a distraction, right? It's a distraction, it's an obstacle, it's a hindrance. And that distraction is an illusion and it causes ignorance. Society causes what? Society is the illusion, right? But society also causes, and that illusion causes what? Ignorance. What? Spiritual ignorance. From the spiritual world totally blocks you and keeps your attention and your senses trapped here, your five senses trapped here, and thinking all of this is real. When the reality is you're going to die and this will no longer be real. And nothing here is permanent. All of it is temporary. What's real is fixed and forever and immortal and impermanent. What is real is immortal and never dies. This whole reality is shifting, changing like the waves of the sea. It's an illusion that takes on an appearance and appearance goes away. That appearance is an illusion. The real reality is as God, immortal. But your little second that you think is really 100 years of your life, you superimpose that illusion on reality, thinking that your ego is real, that you are real, or all of your family is real. But no, God is the only being that's real. But God is what? Sleeping and awakening, waves and stress in the ocean of reality or illusion. So how is it that society, especially the Western world, the Western society, is ignorant to this truth? Is because of the social obligations of social validation, trying to do good acts for one's dear ones to impress them, and evil acts towards now your enemies to get social positioning. These acts of social positioning prevent and distract you from seeking wisdom. Very key. Remember, there's only a certain amount of time that you have in this life. You have to have a certain opportunity of time to seek the deepest answers, philosophical questions that you have, that everyone has. You have to spend the time digging out and researching and finding that. But it says it distracts you from seeking wisdom and from doing deep meditation. Deep meditation is going into trance-like states and discovering latent and hidden and subjective spaces of consciousness or perception that are always simultaneously here with us, but we rarely have the opportunity to be able to get a grip of it and pierce into those worlds. This goes into the reason why society is a problem. It obligates you to all of this activity, good and bad activity, for the attainment of your desires, which is nothing but a place of addiction or bondage. It keeps you from gaining wisdom, knowledge of self, knowledge of your soul, the mysteries of all of reality, the mysteries of God, who God is, where God is, all of these different inquiries and questions. And it keeps you from deep meditation. Now, society and the desires of it is the illusion of the devas. Now remember, the devas are on the solar plexus. Society is based on, like I said, the realm of influence of social positioning. That realm on the low is what the devas control. The devas are basically demigods. They're called archons. They have many names. Basically, they're lower, fourth, fifth generation, some of the fourth generation deities in the pantheons of most mystery systems or spiritual systems all across the world. And they basically is what traps you from reaching spiritual liberation and going to heaven. They're the ones who trap you because of that desire. Remember, we started, the root of it is the desires. That's why you seek social validation. The deities represent status, power, political power, social power, celebrity, so on, social positioning and social respect. Those are those particular principles in humans, the human psychology. And they keep you from going into the higher spiritual states, moving from, remember we moved all the way up through the seventh, where we basically just went through wisdom and deep meditation, wisdom, throat chakra, deep meditation, the trance-like states, and Tapaloka. Remember, Maha, Jhana, Tapa, and Satya, the spiritual liberation or the highest of heavens, Vaikuntha, Brahmaloka, so many different names, Golika, heaven, is the seventh and highest state, which those terms are many different ways of explaining it in mythology and mythological concepts. But basically, that spiritual liberation or that moksha, that nirvana, is Satyaloka, or the realm of reality. That is heaven.